Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today we're going over rotary engraving. You won't need any calipers or a math degree to rotary engrave in LASERGRBL. It is so darn easy. So I don't know how many of you have bought a rotary engraver to leave it on the shelf. Show of hands, it's not really that intimidating. So we'll be going over a 5-watt output settings and a 10-watt output laser settings. So I'll be using my OLM2Pro and my OLM3. So we're going to set up some wine glasses. We're going to do some tumblers. We're even going to do one of these, which a lot of people claim they're stubborn. They're not really that stubborn. And we're going to do some stainless steel. We're also going to do a mug with a handle. And I'm even going to engrave a photo onto a coffee jar. Now what you will need is a flexible measuring tape. And that allows you to be able to measure how big you want to make your graphic. And you can also mark where you'd like to put your starting point if what you're engraving on already has a logo on the other side. So the first thing you'll want to do is raise your machine. Now you can use, say, 2 6-inch blocks for the right hand side and a 5 1/4 inch blocks on the other side, then using a 3/4 inch board to raise your cable loom as well. And this will help not putting excess pressure on your stepper motor. Now I do suggest to secure your cords as well because they are raised. And I do suggest a Z height adjuster. Now you may have to change out your bracket like I did. I had it on the higher section. So this is showing my LU24 and my 10-watt laser. So I moved the bracket down on my LU24. And unfortunately, the Z height adjuster will not work with my 10-watt because it only has the slider function. As you can see, there is a sizable difference between the two sliders, so I am going to have to modify my newer Z height adjuster. This is my older one that I'm able to use the slider function with, and I just made my own little bracket there and was able to use the original holes and screws, and that just keeps my laser from hitting the front of my machine when it homes. Now I just wanted to show you what I've done with my laser cord is I've zip tied it to the post of the laser, and that keeps the laser cord from hanging down and hitting my material when I'm engraving. Now on the new Z height adjuster, this was handy. The 2 threaded holes that are on the top are actually for a 10-watt laser motherboard mount, but I actually used it with just one of the slider adjustment screws, and I was able to fix my quick released air hose right on top, so it's not dangling anymore. Now I also borrowed the limit switch extender and put this onto where your cord management just had you zip tying right tight to the machine there. So I added another bracket with zip ties and was able to raise the cord that way as well. And I had already slid my homing switch forward more and fastened it down. And this will keep your laser, when it's homing, from hitting the very front of your machine. But enough of that. Let's get setting up our rotary. So you're not going to plug in the rotary yet. You're going to turn on your machine first and start up LASERGRBL. Make it nice and big. You're going to connect your machine, and then you're going to go into the GRBL configurations. So make sure your machine's connected. Then we're going to go into GRBL configurations, and you're going to scroll down to value 22. And I'll just make this nice and big. Value 22 is your homing cycle. So 1 enables it. You're going to put a 0 there to disable it. And we're just going to double check the settings here for 101, and it's 80 millimeters per minute, and that is what we want it to be. Now we do have to change that with the OLM3, but you're not changing it on that. So you're going to click on Write, and it will show you that it's written successfully, and then you'll close that. And then you're going to turn off your machine, and then you're going to unplug this plug here from the left-hand side of your machine. And then you're going to line up the cable from your rotary engraver tool accessory, and you're going to plug in your rotary. So pretty easy looking so far, right? Now, I like this spacing that I have set up for my wheels here, and everything you see me doing today, I have kept those spacings of those wheels. And now, by taking my fancy schmancy 1x3 board, I line up the rotary engraver to be level and straight with my engraver. Now, with my machine off, I'm going to set up any mugs that I will be doing, and I'll try to make sure they're level, especially if they're tapered. So I will use my measuring tool at the highest point of whatever I am engraving, and I will measure with the tool at the top, and I will measure with the tool at the bottom. I will then bring my laser back with it turned off manually to the highest point that I measured it to and to the top of the cup. Now, if you're switching out to smaller cups, like we'll be doing the tumbler, you can always raise your rotary up and just make sure it's a flat level board. So unfortunately, this cutting board has a little bit of warp to it, so I put a little wedge underneath the one corner. And because the cup that I'm going to be doing has a slight taper, I'm just actually putting a tile under the 1/4 of the rotary engraver. And then, of course, using my fancy schmancy measuring tool, and my machine is still off, I will bring that board, make sure it's flat, set up nice, flat, straight. So I will line that up to the rail, and I will line that up to my rollers as well. You'll see that on my rotary engraver, the stepper motor, the belts, and the little guide is to the left-hand side, and to the right-hand side of the rotary engraver, which is where you would add those wheels if you were doing a wine glass. It's the stem holder. So right now we are doing the tapered glass, so that's why I put the tile on the very end of the right-hand side of the rotary tool, so that it would raise it enough to keep it flat and level to keep my laser beam focused. And it doesn't matter if you're out a little bit, the laser does a wonderful job. Okay, so we're ready to put that machine on. Now you're going to see the red button flashing a warning, but don't panic. When you start up your machine and it doesn't return to the homing switch, you know you have it plugged in right. So now we're ready for testing, and I actually designed up a nice little heart that would be inconspicuous on a cup, and for most cups it wouldn't look that noticeable that I used it as a test. It'll just look like an added little engraving on the cup. So I'm going to export that as a PNG, and I've already got that file. I'm just going to save, and I'm going to say yes to replace that existing file. And I've selected objects. I'm going to keep that a solid color, keep it at 300 dpi, we'll keep it at its original size, and then I will click on OK. So I'm going to go over a number of files today, and yes, I will be uploading these files for free on the DiSignsCdn Facebook group for subscribers only, so you'll find that in the files portion. So with LASERGRBL already still open, I'm going to open up my heart test. So I'm going to keep that on smooth, and I'm going to keep it on black and white. Now I can move these sliders and you'll see kind of the sharpness of my heart disappear completely or become a little too rough. And right now you'll see that I have my box right now that I'm working in a little small. So you think it actually looks okay, but I'm going to show you in a little bit that you really should make that box bigger. Now we're going to keep it on line-to-line tracing. I'm going to keep it on horizontal, and I am going to keep it on 10 lines. Ignore that. I had to splice a few videos together, so 15 lines was actually for the Yeti setting, but 10 lines is fine for this black tumbler. Okay, so we're going to make that nice and big, and then you're going to see it looks pretty rough after I crop it. So I'm just going to use that black and white slider tool, and I'm going to slide that until I get a smoother appearance. Now I do have smoothing and that turned on for settings in the following box that you're going to see. Now the most important thing is to rotate it. So this will be the top of the glass is the left-hand side. That is the bottom of the glass is the right-hand side. So now we're good to click next. So our settings for this black tumbler that I just got from Amazon, our engraving speed is 2000 millimeters per minute. We're going to keep that on dynamic power. Our minimum is 5% and our maximum is 95%. I'm going to click on the auto size and then click on create. Now we're going to go up and pick our COM port for our laser engraver, and we're going to go into the GRBL and connect. So we're all connected, and I'm going down and clicking the unlock button because if you'd seen on the right hand side, the machine was in the alarm state. So we needed to unlock it, and now we have full access of all our buttons. So I can use my frame button to see exactly where I'm going to engrave on the mug. I can also go left-hand bottom side here, the arrow keys, and jog anywhere where I want that engraving to start. So by using the left arrow would move the engraver up, right arrow would move the engraver down, the back and bottom actually spins the mug. So of course I don't think I set the origin because I just wanted it to start exactly where I had it at the top. And then I will press play. And we're starting to engrave. Rotary engrave, woohoo! And we're all done. Now it's got a little bit of charring, so I will just actually take a piece of paper towel with rubbing alcohol to bring up the silver finish. Now this mum graphic I actually did on my OLM3, and it was at a definitely higher power that engraved right into the stainless steel. And again, I went at too high a power and too low a speed on my OLM3 for that Yeti to get that really charred stainless steel look. So you want to find that happy in between where it's a nice silver finish. And we're going to do that right now. So you'll see I have it on the line-to-line tracing, 15 lines for the Yeti. I've already rotated the heart, and my engraving speed is going to be 1000. My laser mode is going to be dynamic power. Remember, constant power is for cutting only. My minimum is going to be 50, which equals the 5%. My maximum, I'm going to put 950 in there for 95%. I'm also going to click on the auto size to keep the size of the heart to the size that I designed, and I will click on create. So you'll see my machine there on the right hand side is in the alarm state. So I have to go down and press the unlock button again. I will frame where I want it to engrave, and then I will press play. And I'm just turning my machine off before I go in there to take out the cup. So you will see a noticeable difference with the engraving. Paper towel and rubbing alcohol will not take this off. You have to use a magic sponge. So as you can see, I have a much better silver finish there compared to I overburnt it on the OLM3. And that's the finish that you want. So see, Yetis aren't so hard. Okay, let's take our level of difficulty up. We're going to do a mug that has a handle. Now I am using black acrylic craft paint and a very soft bristle brush. And I've actually dampened the brush as well to make sure that the paint is flowing a lot nicer and smoother. Now some people have used tempera paint. It's very thin, and the black goes on fairly smooth with the acrylic paint. You might need 1 or 2 coats, but I will just go back and forth in different directions until I get it nice and even. Now you can also use a foam brush, or you can use a matte black spray paint, but I'm using the acrylic paint because I can just wash it off with water after I engrave it. Now you may be wondering, why do I need a coating? Well, the matte black finish is going to absorb the laser's power so that the heat only engraves the very surface of it. And if you didn't have a coating, it wouldn't engrave at all. So you need that coating in order for the laser to do microfractures in the glass. So I have LaserGRBL open, and I'm going to open up the file that we will be using to engrave on the mug that has the handle. And we're going to use the Chaos Coordinator with the dad life around it. Now I use the Smart Crop function because we're going to be very limited on the space that we have to engrave on this mug. So I have my settings on smooth, black and white. I'm going to go with horizontal and the quality of 10 lines. And I'm using line-to-line tracing. So remember, the left-hand side of the screen is the top of the mug, the right-hand side is the bottom. So the engraving speed I'm going to be using is 2000 with dynamic power. Minimum is 5%, the maximum is 95%. And then I will click on auto size, so it's the exact same size as what I designed the design to be. So I will connect, and again I will hit the unlock button. And the first thing I'm going to do is frame to make sure that our graphic is going to work here. So when I first framed it, you'll see that the mug raised a little bit there because the handle hit the roller. So I need to go back into the file and resize that file to fit. So I'm going right back into the file, opening it again. I'm not changing any of the original settings that I had there, but I will auto trim it and I will rotate it and then click next. Now I'm just going to change my millimeter size down just a wee bit, and I'm going to click on create. Then I'm going to frame that one as well to see how much clearance I have on that handle. And it ended up, I had a little more space than I had anticipated. So I went back in and resized it again. Now how I figured out the size for the logo that I wanted to do was when I had the handle at its high point there on the roller, I took my flexible sewing machine sewing measuring tape and I measured from the edge of the handle down to the roller to see how much space I would have there in order for the roller to move, and then that's how big I had made the logo to be so that I knew it would fit within there. So there I frame, and I'm happy with where the handle rests now. It doesn't lift up the cup. And then the next thing I will do is go to the bottom left-hand side of the screen there, and I am going to move the laser down a bit by clicking on that right arrow. And then I'm going to reframe that to make sure it's exactly where I want it on the mug. And then I will press play. And there we go. We're engraving a glass mug on the Rotary accessory. Woohoo! And here's the engraving just finishing up. Returning to its home position. I'll turn the machine off. And let's take a look at our mug. And as you can see, so it's engraved away the black paint and it's left a very smooth finish. Now, if you don't have a smooth finish like this and you have too many microfractures, it's because you went too slow and too high a power. If you run your finger across the engraving, it should almost feel smooth, but it won't cut ya. And tiny glass shards should not flake off. Okay, we're stepping up our difficulty level here. Now we're going to try photo engraving, on the coffee jar that I painted. And you'll see my design there. I have the photo that I've already put to grayscale. And I've added a black box behind so I could add the Soulmates lettering. Now the Soulmates is white and I've put a black background behind it because I just want to show you turning the wireframe off. I want to differentiate from the lettering and have a little bit of space between the graphic. So I did do a white bounding box around, and I also put a line, and I will show you why in just a few seconds here. So I'm going to export my photo as a PNG. I'm going to say yes, selected objects only. I'm keeping the background transparent because I do want that black line to show up. I'm going to go 300 DPI and then click OK. So then we're going to go into LASERGRBL and I'm going to open the file. So I'm going to grab my Soulmates file there with my wonderful husband. Now this is just showing you in line to line if you wanted to keep it into black and white. You can play with your sliders a little bit there. Now I have it on smooth because I really want the lettering to show up nice. And I just can't seem to get enough detail in that. Now there's other programs that I probably could have done that, but we're taking up our difficulty level here. And so we're going to go with the black and white dithering option. And right now I have it on Atkinson. Now because I'm doing the photograph, I think I eventually switch that over to sharp. But I'm also going to invert the photo. Inverting the photo makes anything that was black, switches it to white, and whatever was white, switches it to black, because we're engraving on glass, which is going to give us that white frosted look. So of course we only want it engraved in white. So I'm changing my lines down to 5 lines. Now I looked at Jarvis and I went back to Atkinson for the amount of detail that I wanted. Now I will play with my brightness and my contrast sliders there to either maximize or minimize the amount of dots. Now what I do is I know that my husband's sleeve is super white there. So I'm looking at the sleeve to get it the greatest amount of detail, because it would be the more solid item. And then I can go and look at the other features. So that's what I do, is I try to find something that is the whitest object and make sure I'm not overdoing our faces or our teeth or anything like that. So of course I rotate it, and you'll see the setting here is 2000, but that's a jar that I did and I got those microfractures from. So that's why I suggested 2600 millimeters instead. And I'm using 95% power. And of course I click on the auto size to keep it the same size that I designed. So there we go. It has opened up and that's what we wanted to see. So we're going to connect this machine again. We're going to go down and unlock it again to get it out of the alarm state. So we have all the use of our buttons. So now I am going to frame and see where the graphic lies on my jar. So I'm starting out with a coffee jar, but I think it would be awesome to do wine bottles as well. And we framed it, and it's where I want it to be. So I'm going to press play, and we're going to start engraving our photo on a coffee jar on our rotary accessory. Woohoo! So you can definitely see we have a lot of light reflecting. So that's why I invested in some good laser glasses in order to filter out that blue light. It makes a big difference, and your eyes will love you. And you'll see why I raised my machine with boards is so that I could put my enclosure on it and close down that enclosure, and that keeps the light from reflecting around my room even more. So we're just going to take this off the laser, and here you go, a nice close-up. So yeah, I think with the coffee jar, even if I had painted it with a spray can of black and then laser engraved, taking that black coating off, I think that would have looked really sharp. Now I've washed it off with soap and water, and I'm just going to put the black piece of vinyl underneath there just to make the engraving pop. And that's not a crack in the glass, it's actually the seam of my vinyl there. And what I'm thinking about doing is taking some polyacrylic with maybe some sparkles or some paint, and I will roll that around in the inside of the jar and then pop it in the oven for a little bit to bake. Now, before turning your machine off, if you're all done rotary engraving, you will go up to your GRBL configurations, because you need to change those settings back now before going to regular engraving again. So value 22, you'll change back to 1. And you'll click on Write. And you'll see the config is written successfully, so you've changed that back. Now you can turn off your engraver before you unplug your rotary accessory. So now let's set up the OLM3, because there's one extra setting you need to do with the OLM3. So we're not going to plug in the rotary yet. And there we go. There I am with my fancy schmancy 1x3 again. And I'm just lining up my rotary engraver so that the board is straight and it's touching the rollers. I'm going to turn on my machine. I'm going to let it come all the way to home. And there you go. You'll see that little bracket that I designed up there. And it keeps my laser from hitting the front of the machine. I'm going to connect again to my laser. And I'm going to go into the GRBL configuration. Now here we need to change the value 22 to 0 because we're turning that homing off. But we also need to go down to value 101 and change that to 80 millimeters, because this particular rotary engraver runs at 80 millimeters, not like the machine, which runs at 100 millimeters. So we're going to click Write, and it won't write unless your machine is on. And we're just going to click No there, because those were the only changes that we made. And then we can go back in and double check, and yes, 22 has been changed to 0, and value 101 has been changed to the 80 millimeters that we need. You will then turn off your machine and plug in your rotary accessory and flip the switch to YRR. So we're just going to do a setup of a tumbler. Now before you engrave any glass or anything else, make sure you're wiping any of your objects down with a paper towel and rubbing alcohol. So with setting up the laser, Here on the OLM3, we've got the little kickstand, which is our focus tool. Okay, so there is a slight taper to this mug. So that's why I will either add or take away just a wedge in order to make the cup as level as possible. So you can see that I'm using the focus tool on the very top part of the glass, so the highest part of the glass. And then once I get that focused, I will very carefully bring my machine and my laser so that the laser will be at that very top point that I focus the machine on. And I will also move the laser to the very top of the glass. So just to keep this video a little bit short, these are the settings that I used on these mugs for this graphic. This is the setting that I used on the stainless steel. Now I engraved this directly on the stainless steel with no coating whatsoever. Now I was a little leery of doing stainless steel because I'm always afraid the laser beam is going to focus back and split my lens. So I'm still a little leery about doing stainless. And these are the settings I used on my wine glasses. But in just a second, I am going to show you how to set up your wine glass. And here we go. Now I know there is a slight taper to the glass as well, but I am using the rollers that come with the rotary attachment. And right now I am just trying to see if I can get the wine glass as level as possible, and I will tighten those rollers so that the stem is held on those rollers. And yep, using my handy dandy fancy schmancy 1x3 straightening tool. Again, I'm just going to line that up, take the glass out of the way. With my machine off, never use your machine, never push it around, I mean, while it is on. So I've got that all lined up again. And I will use the focus once again on the highest point of the glass. Now, with a wine glass, you are not going to get it totally horizontal level. But the laser still seems to do a really wonderful job on these. So I'm going to power on the machine. And of course, it works right away. I do not have to worry about unlocking the machine. I was able to go in straight away and frame it. And I think I jogged the laser down a little bit. And then I press play. And there we go. We're rotary engraving on our OLM3. And there it is all done. And I will go wash that with water. So when you're all done rotary engraving, do not shut off the machine. We need to go back into the GRBL configuration and change the value of 22 back to 1 and the value of 101 back to 100. Then you can turn off your machine, and then you can unplug and flip the switch back. And that's how easy it is to rotary engrave. I don't know why I was so intimidated by it. So please join me in my next video. We're going to be going over 2D engraving or getting deeper engravings off of your laser. So I hope this video helps and inspires. Make sure to click on notifications so you're notified of any videos that I post. And as always, I hope this helps and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe. Now go create!